Under a false name, Sammy Davis Jr. maintained a storage facility. Until his death, he made monthly payments in cash. In a Burbank warehouse, it remained unaltered for 30 years. When investigators eventually opened it, they discovered more than just souvenirs. Letters revealing the identity of his true mother were found. Tapes of potentially career-destroying talks and evidence of the actual events involving Kim Novak in 1958. He kept track of everything. Finally, the truth has come to light after 30 years of silence. On December 8, 1925, in Harlem, New York City, Sammy Davis Jr. was born. Elvira Sanchez and Sammy Davis Sr., his parents, were also vaudeville entertainers. That meant that Sammy had a history in show industry from birth. But there was more to his story than that. Elvira, his mother, was of Cuban descent. At the time, there were anti-Cuban sentiments in America, so the family kept that information to themselves. Back then, disclosing their origins may have harmed record sales and popular support. Sammy's life was influenced by racism and the desire to conceal aspects of his identity even as a newborn. His life's trajectory was established by Harlem, which was teeming with the vitality of the Harlem Renaissance. Sammy began performing with the Wilmaston Trio, which was headed by his father and a family friend named Wilmaston, when he was 2 years old. Most toddlers engaged in toy play. Sammy sang and danced at theaters all across the nation. He used the limelight as a playground, but at a price. It was not a typical childhood for him. As other children attended school, he instead studied how to captivate audiences and become an expert in his craft. Despite being exhausting, the continuous touring brought him strength. It also revealed to him the terrible side of racism in the United States. The sting of being treated differently hit him as he saw the signs that read whites only. He was born with the will to smash down barriers. Sammy's life changed when she was only 3 years old. His parents were divorced. He became much more involved in show business after his father took custody of him. Wilmaston evolved beyond a mentor. He acted as Sammy's godfather, protecting him to the best of his ability. However, no one could provide the full extent of protection. Sammy witnessed the prejudice that black performers had to deal with. But he also knew how to respond gracefully and with skill. And through unrelenting diligence. Even as a little child, he was unique. He had become a seasoned veteran by this point, touring from city to city and leaving audiences speechless. Sammy made his cinematic debut in Rufus Jones for President when he was 7 years old. In a movie that ventured to envision a black youngster as president, he co-starred with Ethel Waters. Though humorous, the film has a serious message. During a period when black faces were uncommon in Hollywood, Sammy's charisma glowed on screen. He won hearts with his dancing and singing. What was coming was alluded to in the movie. A performance was not all that Sammy was. A force he was. He possessed the unique ability to make others overlook his skin tone, even for a brief moment. But sacrifice was a part of the theater life. Sammy rarely attended school like other children. He had no school bells, no chalkboards, and no desks. He learned from the road, from literature he came across, from people he encountered, and from the stages he owned. He taught himself talents that could not be learned in a classroom, including languages and instruments. His desire to perform was equal to his desire to learn. He demonstrated that greatness does not always originate in a school. It might result from a mind that is constantly eager to learn, passion, and grit. The year 1943 was a turning point. Sammy, who was 18 years old, 5 feet 6 inches, and weighed 120 pounds, was drafted into the U.S. Army. He entered a much harsher world after leaving the protection of the stage. Although he joined one of the first merged groups, the Unity Pledge turned out to be a falsehood. There was racism in the Army. He was referred to as a slur by the first soldier he encountered. He was struck hard by the harsh reality. His skill was useless in uniform. Almost every day he had to deal with hatred in battles in order to survive. The Army was meant to develop men. Sammy's innocence was shattered. He endured horrifying mistreatment. He was once taken hostage by white forces. Insulting everything about him, they painted him white from head to toe. Once more, they deceived him into consuming beer that had been tainted with pee. They peed on him on some evenings. 3 times his nose was broken, and they weren't finished. By making him perform and writing derogatory remarks on his forehead before pushing him onto the platform, they degraded him. There was no limit to the cruelty. Intended to smash him. In the bitter weather, soldiers bound him to a tree one night. Like so many others before him who had been victims of racial fear, he stood there defenseless. His skin was pricked by the cold, but the ache was deeper. The message was to always remember your place, regardless of where you go or what you do. The troops failed to defend him. It turned away. He was forever scarred by that night, both physically and emotionally. It grew worse. He was beaten so severely by a bunch of troops in one vicious incident that he was hospitalized for 3 days. The thrashing wasn't arbitrary. It served as a penalty. However, none faced consequences. The hostility was allowed to grow by the army that was meant to bring Americans together. That hospital bed was where Sammy slept. Recognizing the necessity of surviving independently, he was driven to dark realms by the suffering. He considered ending everything. Hatred's weight in the unending brutality. It nearly broke him. But he was drawn back by something. His weapon, voice, dancing, and showmanship were discovered when he joined the Army's entertainment section. Not even the individuals who despised him could dispute it. Their cheers gave him strength. Sammy Davis Jr. was prepared to take on the world in 1951 after returning from military service. After fighting for his nation, he now wished to defend his career in entertainment. Curras, Sunset Boulevard's most glitzy nightclub, was where the opportunity came. The month was March 1951. Sammy served as Janice Page's opening act in the Will Maston Trio. The evening was enchanted. But an amazing occurrence happened that year following the Academy Awards. The room was crowded with celebrities, including Judy Garland, Cary Grant, Marilyn Monroe, Lauren Bacall, and Humphrey Bogart. They were amazed by Sammy's performance, which instantly made him famous. There was an irresistible hum. Bookings were flooding in. He made an appearance on Eddie Cantor's Colgate Comedy Hour in 1952, and ABC even offered him a $20,000 TV pilot. It was unprecedented for a performer of black descent. It had no sponsor, but Sammy had already made it. CAR. He became the town's talk thanks to Rose. Tragic events occurred only 3 years later, in 1954. Sammy was only 29 years old when he drove his Cadillac from Las Vegas to Los Angeles on November 19. Another vehicle backed into his lane at a fork in U.S. Route 66. The car's horn button was pushed into his left eye during the collision. It was irreparable. Despite his prompt arrival at the community hospital, the eye could not be saved by the doctors. He was there for just 9 days. He was supported by friends like Frank Sinatra. He received 3 times as many show offers as he used to. Initially wearing an eye patch, Sammy later wore a glass eye. He made a joke about being a Jewish Negro with one eye. Many believed his career had ended. However, 8 weeks later, he was back on stage at Syros, once again dazzled by the best of Hollywood. Another aspect of Sammy's life was altered by that accident. He converted to Judaism in 1960. He read about the protracted battle for survival of the Jews while he was recuperating. Eddie Cantor, a buddy, had given him a mezuzah. And they discussed faith. Sammy experienced a sense of belonging. He claimed that he had always thought like a Jew. He was made fun of by many, but he felt stronger because he was Jewish and black. He defended civil rights and turned into a symbol of tenacity. Sammy encountered harsh bigotry even as his notoriety increased. He could play as the main act in Las Vegas in the 1950s, but he was not allowed to stay in the hotels where he did so. He was not allowed to enter the eateries or eat there. He wasn't going to take it. He called for reform. The Rat Pack helped him exert pressure on casinos. By the early 1960s, he was the first black entertainer to remain on the frontier, earning $25,000 a week at the Sands. Official segregation was finally abolished in Las Vegas hotels by 1971. It was made possible by Sammy. More than just a singer, Sammy was. He possessed a wide range of skills. He learned how to play the vibraphone, piano, drums, trumpet, and more on his own. He had the ability to dance, tell jokes, impersonate people, mimic sounds, and even pull off gun stunts. His performances were unpredictable. No one else was able to accomplish it all, therefore he became known as Mr. Show Business. Sammy was a Broadway hit in 1956. On March 22, Mr. Wonderful opened. The show was written specifically for him, which at the time was nearly unprecedented for a black celebrity. It was vilified by critics. The New York Times described it as mediocre and noisy. Sammy's magnetism, however, filled the seats. After 383 performances, the musical recouped its $225,000 investment. He even incorporated his nightclub act into each performance, making it something new. He took the stage with his father and uncle. The cast also included Rivera, a young cheetah. Sammy had high-profile romances and threw wild parties offstage. On Broadway, he created history. Sammy created history once more with Golden Boy in 1964. October 20th was its opening date. He portrayed a black fighter who fell in love with a white woman. There was uproar when he kissed her on stage. There were then threats of bombs and death. However, Sammy remained steadfast. He received a Tony nomination for his performance. He also participated in the Selma March alongside Martin Luther King Jr. during this period. Sammy put everything he had on the line for his beliefs. Viewers were compelled to confront harsh realities by his broadcast. Sammy continued after leaving the stage. He played the lead in Ana Lucasta in 1958. It was cast entirely in black and addressed difficult problems. He glowed on screen alongside Dorothy Dandridge and Sidney Poitier in 1959's Porgy and Bess. He made his breakthrough in Bob Fosse's Sweet Charity in 1969. In 1960, he joined the Rat Pack in Ocean's 11, and in 1964, he joined Robin in The Seven Hoods. Sammy made Hollywood more accessible to black actors. You could see Sammy everywhere on TV. He made appearances on The Tonight Show, The Ed Sullivan Show, and numerous more shows. His first project was the Sammy Davis Jr. in 1966 NBC show. Among the first black performers to appear as the main attraction on a primetime network variety show was him. He was joined by celebrities including Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. Giving hundreds of interviews every week to promote the show, he put in more work than anyone else. His popularity made it easier for other black performers to get airtime. Sammy Davis Jr. and Frank Sinatra became friends in 1941. Sammy was just 15 years old. He was in Detroit, playing with the Will Maston Trio. Frank began traveling with Tommy Dorsey's orchestra at the age of 26. Frank realized that something extraordinary was happening when he saw Sammy on stage. For the next 10 years, Frank continued to find ways to assist Sammy. Frank arranged for the Will Maston Trio to open for him at the Capitol Theater in New York in 1947. Sammy's life was drastically altered and given a major break at that very moment. In addition to opening doors, Frank defended Sammy when it really counted. Sammy was denied access to the Copacabana in New York in 1950 due to his race. Frank was quite angry. The following evening, he insisted that Sammy return. They welcomed Sammy this time. Then Frank did not stop. He made it a point to enter clubs with Sammy, sit at the same table, and turn down engagements at establishments that didn't treat Sammy fairly. During a period when black performers were required to utilize different hotels and entrances, Frank's acts were audacious and risky. When Sammy lost his left eye and almost died in an automobile accident in 1954, Frank took over once more. After settling the hospital fees, he took Sammy to Palm Springs for his recuperation. There was no room for self-pity in Frank. Sammy was told to return to the stage or else he would lose everything. Sammy returned to public appearances in a matter of weeks. He became renowned for his bravery. Frank was so admirable to Sammy that he attempted to emulate his mannerisms. His hair even had a curl. They demonstrated to the world what true loyalty looked like through their friendship. It enabled Sammy to enter the elite circles of Hollywood. That friendship was portrayed to the world on a large screen in 1960. August 3 saw the debut of Ocean's 11 in Las Vegas. The actors who starred in the movie were Peter Lawford, Joey Bishop, Sammy, Dean Martin, and Frank. Playing World War II veterans, they executed a huge theft. Behind the scenes, the Rat Pack performed live at the Sands and other clubs till morning while filming scenes at night. Sammy portrayed Josh Howard, a crucial component in the scheme. Today, the movie earned roughly $55 million, or $5.5 million, at the box office. The Rat Pack passing a casino sign bearing their names in the last shot became a famous picture. Sammy had changed from being a sidekick. He was among the celebrities. In Las Vegas, Sammy was making up to $25,000 a week by the late 1950s. However, despite packing theaters, he was unable to stay at the hotels where he gave performances. He had to remain on the West Side, miles away, due to segregation. Sammy refused to let it go. He was the first black performer to receive free accommodations on the frontier. That made it easier to overcome the color barrier in Las Vegas. He persisted, endorsing demonstrations for civil rights and dining at Tropicana for a steak. Sammy had a role in the 1971 legislation that ended hotel discrimination in Nevada. Las Vegas turned out its lights for a moment after his death in 1990. He is now treated like a king in the city that previously sent him away. Sammy made a lasting impression on movies following Ocean's 11. Alongside the Rat Pack, he starred in Sergeants 3 in 1962. The film earned $4.3 million. Sammy even donned a John Wayne Lone hat. He starred in Robin and the Seven Hoods, a comedy, gangster drama, and music movie released in 1964. Alongside Frank, Dean, and Bing Crosby, Sammy played Will and held his own. Not all of these movies were enjoyable. They demonstrated that Sammy was a self-made star. He had an impact on Hollywood's perception of black performers. Sammy's life, however, was more than just celebrity. Kim Novak captured his heart in 1957. She was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. On Steve Allen's show, they first connected. They soon began spending holidays together and even got to know one another's families. Interracial partnerships, however, were risky back then. Just 4% of Americans thought they were good. People were still thinking about the lynching of Emmett Till. Sammy and Kim made an effort to hide their relationship. In automobiles, Sammy hid behind blankets. They met in Malibu at a beach house. However, a gossip magazine in January 1958 made a bogus report that they were engaged. The word got around like wildfire. Studios were in a panic. The crowd became involved. Morgan Pictures-affiliated mobsters abducted Sammy. He was warned to break up with Kim or risk losing his remaining eye. In Hollywood, even mob boss Sam Giancana said he was unable to keep Sammy safe. Sammy was frightened. His relationship with Kim ended on January 7, 1958. He was unwilling to. He was powerless. He wed the black vocalist Lorraine White a few days later on January 10. It was a hoax to appease the public and media. She was paid up to $25,000 by him. That night, he attempted to strangle her because he was so upset. Afterwards, his assistant discovered him with a gun by himself. April marked the end of the marriage. The romance between Sammy and Kim had cost him nearly everything. It demonstrated the peril of questioning racial norms in 1950s America. When Sammy Davis Jr. and Mae Britt got married in 1960, it was more than simply a marriage. One of the most repulsive taboos in America was directly challenged. Interracial marriage was prohibited in 31 states at the time. Only 4% of Americans supported black-white marriages, according to a 1958 Gallup poll. When the synagogue received violent warnings and bomb threats, The couple's plan to get married at Temple Israel of Hollywood was derailed. The ceremony was forced to be moved to Davis's house in the Hollywood Hills. Peter Lawford and Frank Sinatra watched from the sidelines. May and Sammy had both become Jews prior to the wedding. They rose to prominence as one of the few interracial black Jewish couples. They paid a heavy price for their bravery. Swastikas showed up on their land. Britt's contract with 20th Century Fox was terminated. Davis's decision to love someone led to his exclusion from President Kennedy's 1961 inauguration. Having a family presented its own challenges. In 1961, their daughter Tracy was born. Mark and Jeff, two sons, were later adopted by them. Hatred continued. On their vehicles, people wrote racial epithets. Swastikas were used as vandalism on their house. Sammy and May attempted to keep their children safe, putting them in the company of friends who valued skill over race. However, the world beyond that bubble could be harsh. According to Tracy, she was astonished by the racism she encountered outside of their social circle after feeling protected at times. Britt was out of a job. Sammy remained involved in his children's lives even after their divorce, as the studios felt that no one wanted to see a white actress married to a black man. His son's bar mitzvah was financed, and he assisted with their Jewish education. Following 8 years of marriage, Britt filed for divorce in 1968. She mentions severe brutality and psychological distress. Although Sammy's affair with singer Lola Falana was the tipping point, their issues were more widespread. His family didn't have much room because of his constant touring and the pressure of public hatred. Sammy's world came crashing down after the separation. He became addicted to drugs and booze. His escape consisted of cocaine and amyl nitrite. His residence in Beverly Hills became a raucous party spot where famous people went to drink and take drugs. He shone on the stage. Off stage, he was frequently inebriated, intoxicated, and unruly. The distance between his public renown and personal suffering widened. Dancer Altavis Gore married Sammy in 1970. Officiating was the Reverend Jesse Jackson. A year prior to Sammy's passing, in 1989, they adopted a son, Manny. He had some stability thanks to Altavisai, but their lives were anything but peaceful. Their home was notorious for its crazy parties. Orgies and wife-swapping were the subject of rumors. Altavisai supported Sammy during his fight against addiction and, later, throat cancer. She owed approximately $7 million in taxes upon his death in 1990. She lost most of their possessions and their house. In contrast to their earlier glitz, she suffered with poverty and her own drinking problem. She nevertheless worked to preserve Sammy's memory by planning memorial services and charitable endeavors. Sammy's financial downfall was exacerbated by his addiction to gambling. His career earnings were approximately $50 million. He earned up to $185,000 a night at times. As he passed away, he owed the IRS more than $7 million. One night at the tables, he could spend $40,000. In contrast to Sinatra, who frequently had his debts forgiven, Sammy was forced to cover his losses. He was further troubled by dubious tax shelters and bad commercial dealings. There was also the factor of his kindness. He went well beyond his means and provided for a large number of people. For the first and only time, he peaked at the top of the charts in June 1972. The Candyman, his rendition, peaked at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It garnered him a gold record and sold more than 2 million copies. Sammy had detested the song, so this was unexpected, but a new generation of admirers was won over by its lovely melody and his charisma. He made I've Gotta Be Me his anthem. With its theme of enjoying life to the fullest and remaining loyal to oneself, the 1968 song resonated with Sammy's struggle for self-identity. He experienced religious discrimination and prejudice, and he even lost his left eye in a vehicle accident in 1954. However, he was never broken by these things. Each performance became a declaration of resistance and hope as he frequently concluded shows with the song. He made Las Vegas his kingdom. There, he made up to $25,000 a week by the late 1960s. He pushed for equal treatment, which helped alter the city's bigoted practices. He performed brilliant medleys of humor, dance, music, and impressions. Due in part to his success, Las Vegas became a center of entertainment. His image continues to be a permanent monument on billboards and casino walls. Sammy broke barriers on TV as well. The Ed Sullivan Show and The Tonight Show were among the shows he dominated in the 1960s and 1970s. His 1966 series was one of the first variety shows presented by a black celebrity on a network, making history. He won millions of hearts by effortlessly impersonating, dancing, singing, and joking. However, the negative aspects of his life were never far away. Throughout his years of occult research, his drinking and drug addiction deteriorated. Friends talked about reckless excess, drugs, and unending alcohol. Sammy acknowledged that although he wanted to do everything, he was exhausted. Addiction and treachery caused his marriage to May to collapse. He stopped his show after just one song, demonstrating his lack of dependability. Even though he eventually stopped using cocaine, he continued to struggle with drinking. It grew more difficult for him to control his demons the further he went in his sinister endeavors. During those years, the renowned Mr. Show industry appeared to be in danger of going bankrupt. Fans everywhere were ecstatic when Sammy Davis Jr. chose to rejoin Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra in 1987. The farewell tour was finally happening, after years of dreaming about it. It was first dubbed the International Farewell Tour. When Liza Minnelli joined in later, it was dubbed the Ultimate Event. There had never been a tour like this one for the Rat Pack. No longer did they perform in tiny nightclubs. They gave performances in enormous arenas with capacities ranging from 10,000 to 25,000. It was an unprecedented act of bravery. The Oakland Coliseum hosted the first performance on March 13, 1988. Initially, it seemed magical, but soon flaws appeared. The late-night gatherings and constant travel were too much for Dean Martin, who was already 70. He departed after only 5 appearances, citing a renal issue as the reason. Despite the tour's suspension, Sinatra and Davis persisted. After bringing in Minnelli, the performance continued. Miami was where they concluded the U.S. leg in January 1989. They then performed in Europe, Japan, and Australia. In May 1989, the trip came to a conclusion at last. The actual conflict began in August 1989. Sammy's sense of taste started to fade. He had a persistent sore throat. He immediately received the devastating news from doctors. Cancer of the throat. He'd heard it all from all those years of smoking, up to 4 packs a day. Sammy could choose. He had 2 options: either let surgeons to remove his vocal box to save his life, or try radiotherapy to continue singing. He picked out his voice. He underwent grueling treatment for 8 weeks. It appeared to be effective at first. Tumor size decreased. Sammy even made a few appearances on stage again, but the disease returned in early 1990. And quickly spreading. Surgery was out of the question. Sammy lost weight to around 60 pounds and was hardly able to speak. He lost his voice, his strength, and ultimately his life due to the illness. Sammy Davis Jr. passed away at the age of 64 on May 16, 1990, his gift to the world muffled by the very habit that had driven his long nights and never-ending performances. But the melancholy didn't end there. Sammy's financial situation became public knowledge after he passed away at his home in Beverly Hills. He earned millions of dollars over the course of 6 decades, but he's still owing over $5 million in taxes. That debt had increased to $7 million, or around $13 million in today's currency, after penalties and interest. Even though his estate was valued about $4 million, the IRS confiscated it all to cover the debt. The task of picking up the pieces fell to his wife, Altavis. She was now responsible for a portion of the debt since she co-signed their tax returns. The mortgage was paid off with the majority of the $2.7 million she had to sell their 11,000 square foot property for. The debts continued after then. Sammy still had $118,000 on a retail center mortgage, $30,500 for food, and $2,000 for tuxedos. Future revenues and even his insurance were paid directly to the IRS. For years, Altavis battled in court. She eventually reached a settlement with the IRS in 1997, but not before losing nearly everything. As one of its brightest stars declined in both health and fortune, the world watched in disbelief. The subsequent auction added to the heartache. There were over 1,800 persons in Los Angeles in September 1991. To purchase fragments of Sammy's life, they came. His personal belongings totaled more than 500 items. $4,270 was the price of his gold record for the Candyman. One of his tap shoes sold for $11,000. Even his hats, walking sticks, scrapbooks, and jewelry were purchased. $439,000 was raised during the auction. That $7 million tax bill was scarcely touched. As she saw the gifts her husband had given her go. The fact that some of Sammy's belongings had already vanished made matters worse. Even an Andy Warhol picture and 185 pieces of jewelry were on the missing list. Then an unexpected twist appeared. Matthias Horancic, a 28-year-old guy, received an odd bill for $365 in late 1991. The storage unit was one he had never rented. They had stolen his ID. A one self-storage in Burbank, the storage company, investigated and discovered that the unit had been booked using false information. Fearing that it might conceal anything hazardous, the manager contacted law enforcement. What they discovered when they unlocked the locker was startling. It contained the personal belongings of Sammy Davis Jr. A trumpet, an old-fashioned record player, a Candyman-themed jukebox, clothes, papers, and pictures were all present. In an attempt to conceal the artifacts, someone had rented the apartment barely 2 weeks following the auction. Police found out that one of Alta Vizzi's employees assisted in hiding the materials. He claimed that the IRS was pursuing everything and that he was attempting to save what remained. They made a cash payment using a stolen ID. They wouldn't have been discovered if they had continued to pay. The IRS discovered. They took possession of the goods in an attempt to collect additional money. Altavis claimed to have no knowledge about it. In a narrative of brilliance, notoriety, and demise, this secret storage was just one more tragic episode.